Welcome back to the program. Joining me live in the studio, as he does every Monday, is a Liberal MP, member for Casey, Aaron Violi. Is there pressure on the coalition to allow through the legislation appointing administrators to the CFMEU? Because I've seen today a statement from the Master Builders. They're saying they're calling on the major parties to please get this done.
Yeah, well, we definitely, Kieran, need to find a solution to this situation with the CFMEU. It's, let's take a step back first and we'll work through the legislation and see the detail. But this Labor government went in opposition as soon as they came in, took away the ABCC, the tough cop on the beat, to hold the CFMEU to account. Now, was it perfect? No, but no organisation, whether it's a police force or other regulatory organisation, will catch everything. So, that's where we want to look at as a coalition is we'll look at the detail of this legislation, but we need to go further than this. We've called for deregistration. I think there's other methods. An ABCC, back on the beat, is another measure we need to look at.
But as a starting point, your inclination would be you'd want to get this through, wouldn't you?
We have to
do something.
We have to do something. This situation's not tenable, so we'll engage in good faith. However, this is the challenge that the Labor Party face with their tight connections to the unions. There's CFMEU officials that are on the pre-selection committee that decides ALP federal pre-selection. So the conflict of interest around federal members of parliament from the ALP making decisions about the CFMEU, while those some CFMEU officials are deciding on their pre-selections, which are still open, that's where we get concerned. The devil's always in the detail with the ALP, and that's what we want to look at. Is it going to be tough enough? On
the polling today, the News Poll has the coalition back at 50-50, so it's competitive right now. Is that your sense of things in the electorate? That you're a chance at the next election?
Oh, look, a long way to go, and the sense I get from the community is there's a deep sense of frustration. They feel like for the first 18 months of this government, they were distracted with the voice. They weren't focused on cost of living, and many Australians and many in my community are feeling let down and abandoned by the Albanese Labor government. At a time when we're seeing productivity at minus 5.2%, the Prime Minister, the Treasurer aren't talking about productivity. They don't have any real relief for the cost of living. All we get from the Prime Minister is a tweet with a little meme about a CD cover, which many in my community reached out to me outraged at the lack of respect they saw the Prime Minister showing them. This is not a laughing matter. But the PM and the Treasurer don't have any solutions to this challenge Australians are facing, and I believe that's what we're seeing in the polls. They've worked out that the Albanese government talked a big game before the election, but they've let them down on every measure.
Well, there are limits as to what you can do, aren't there, in terms of the inflationary environment they find themselves in? We've seen 12 rate rises in a row. There's hardly that much scope to be doing more, is there?
Well, this is the problem that Anthony Albanese has created for himself, Kieran. We are in a global environment. There are multiple factors that are at play in a global economy, absolutely. But look back to the statements that the now Prime Minister, then Opposition Leader, made when in opposition, and in his campaign launch speech. He promised cheaper mortgages, cheaper childcare, a $275 reduction in your power bills. He promised that he had a plan to address the cost of living crisis for the Australian people. And 2 years later, he hasn't delivered on that, and the Australian people have worked that out.
On the visas for those fleeing Gaza, Ed Husic, the Minister for Industry, has pushed back against suggestions by James Paterson that all sympathisers from Hamas should be rejected. He says that the government needs to toughen its line. Ed Husic says the government will be listening to the security agencies, not to the opposition who are trying to score political points.
Well, the opposition aren't trying to score political points. We're trying to ensure that the Australian people are safe. And we saw last year and through this year, Peter Dutton, James Paterson and others on our side have had to lead this debate around national security. And again, take a step back. When we're talking about Hamas, we need to acknowledge, and the government should acknowledge, that they're a registered terrorist organisation that openly and willingly in their platform calls for the destruction of the State of Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East. So the question for the Prime Minister, for Minister Husic and all those in the government is, do they support people coming to Australia that support a terrorist organisation and call for the destruction of the Israeli state?
Ed Husic was asking, does the coalition support any refugees out of Gaza, given the the devastation we've seen?
Well, I think we've seen, and Australians and the Coalition have a strong track record in accepting refugees from war zones. The Coalition took many refugees from Afghanistan after the fall of Afghanistan a couple of years ago.
So you would be taking refugees?
We should always look to take more refugees, provided we can go through the proper processes around security. If they're not supporting terrorist organisations and it's going to increase social cohesion, we should look to take refugees within our agreed refugee take.
Aaron Violi, thanks. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Kieran. Talk soon.